Welcome to Edward Resurrects History. Using AI trained on historical imagery and archaeological reconstruction, we can now see these eras as they may have actually looked. This is the complete history of Iran, from the world's first superpower to the nation of 1950. The columned halls of Persepolis, the fire temples of the Sassanids, the bazaars of Safavid Isfahan. Let's go back to the very beginning. The Iranian plateau is one of the oldest continuously inhabited regions on Earth. By around 7000 BC, farming communities are established in the Zagros Mountains, cultivating wheat and barley, herding goats and cattle on slopes that descend toward the great rivers of Mesopotamia to the west. The site of Chogar Mish in Khuzestan shows evidence of urban settlement from around 6000 BC, grain storage, administrative tokens, the first glimmers of organized society. By around 3000 BC, the southwestern region of Elam has a writing system, a capital city at Susa, and a trading network that reaches from the Persian Gulf to the Indus Valley. Elam is not Persian, not Iranian in the later national sense. It is a distinct ancient civilization, contemporary with Sumeria and Egypt, building ziggurats and keeping records in its own language. But it is the oldest layer of sediment in the deep geological formation that eventually becomes Iran. The Iranian-speaking peoples, ancestors of the Medes and Persians, arrive on the plateau from the Central Asian steppe during the 2nd millennium BC, part of the same broad Indo-European migration that sends related peoples westward into Europe and southward into India. By around 900 BC, the Medes are established in the northwestern highlands around modern Hamadan, and the Persians in the region of Fars in the southwest. For 2 centuries, the Medes dominate. They are the regional power, allies of Babylon in destroying the Assyrian Empire in 612 BC, controlling a territory from Anatolia to the borders of India. Then, in 550 BC, a Persian prince changes everything. Cyrus II, Cyrus the Great, begins as a vassal king of Persia under Median overlordship. In 550 BC, he defeats his Median overlord Astyages, captures the Median capital Ecbatana, and in doing so absorbs the entire Median Empire rather than destroying it. This is the key to understanding Cyrus. He does not simply conquer, he incorporates. He defeats Croesus of Lydia in 547 BC and takes Anatolia. He captures Babylon in 539 BC, the greatest city in the world, whose hanging gardens are among the 7 wonders, without a battle, entering through the Euphrates riverbed, while the Babylonian court is distracted by a festival. In Babylon, he issues his famous cylinder inscription, declaring that he returns peoples to their homelands and restores their temples, including explicitly the Jews exiled by Nebuchadnezzar, who are permitted to return to Jerusalem and rebuild their temple. The Hebrew scriptures call him the Anointed of God. He is the only non-Jewish figure in the Bible to receive that title. Cyrus is killed on campaign in Central Asia in 530 BC. His son Cambyses conquers Egypt in 525 BC, the last great independent civilization not yet under Persian control. Darius I, who seizes power in 522 BC after a succession crisis and consolidates the empire with extraordinary administrative genius, builds the system that makes it actually function. He divides the empire into 20 satrapies, provinces each governed by a royal appointee, each paying taxes in a standardized currency, each connected by the Royal Road, a 2,700-kilometer highway from Sardis in western Anatolia to Susa, with royal postal relay stations every 25 kilometers. A message can travel this entire distance in 7 days, the fastest communication network on Earth for the next 2 centuries. Darius also begins Persepolis, the great ceremonial capital in the mountains of Fars, whose terraced platforms, colossal gate guardians, and relief-carved tribute processions from every corner of the empire express in stone what the Achaemenid ideology claims in words, that all the peoples of the earth, freely and willingly, bring their gifts to the great king. The empire Darius and his successors rule for 2 more centuries is genuinely remarkable in its religious and cultural tolerance. In 480 BC, Xerxes I, great king of Persia, king of kings, ruler of an empire stretching from Egypt to India, has built a bridge of boats across the Hellespont and marched into Greece to finish what his father Darius began. His elite soldiers, the 10,000 immortals, have never been defeated. For 2 days, they hurl themselves at a narrow mountain pass called Thermopylae, held by just several thousand Greeks. They cannot break through. The Greeks have longer spears and better armor in that terrain, and they fight like men who know that civilization itself is at stake. Then a Greek traitor shows Xerxes a mountain path around the pass. The Greeks are encircled. Leonidas and his Spartans stand and fall. Xerxes burns Athens, and yet, within a year, his fleet is shattered at Salamis, his army destroyed at Plataea. The greatest empire on earth retreats. Babylonians worship Marduk. Egyptians worship their own gods. Jews rebuild their temple. The Achaemenid state tolerates, accommodates, and often actively supports local religious institutions, understanding that conquered peoples who can practice their faith are far less likely to revolt than those who cannot. It is one of the most sophisticated governance philosophies of the ancient world. Then comes Alexander. Between 334 and 330 BC, the 22-year-old Macedonian king defeats Darius III in 3 decisive battles: Granicus, Issus, and Gaugamela. He burns Persepolis in 330 BC, whether in deliberate revenge for the burning of Athens in 480 or in a drunken impulse, ancient sources disagree, and pursues Darius eastward into Bactria, where the last Achaemenid king is murdered by his own satraps. Alexander declares himself heir to the Persian throne, adopts Persian court dress, incorporates Persian nobles into his administration, and marries a Bactrian princess named Roxana. He is not, in his own understanding, destroying Persian civilization. He is continuing it under new management. He passes in Babylon in 323 BC at 32 years of age, his empire immediately fragmenting among his generals. The Seleucid successor state rules Iran for over a century, spreading Greek language, architecture, and urban planning across the plateau, founding new cities, blending Greek and Iranian artistic traditions into the distinctive Hellenistic culture of the Eastern world. But it never fully controls the Iranian interior, and by around 247 BC, a nomadic Iranian people called the Pani, under their leader Arsaces, are establishing control over the northeastern province of Parthia. The Parthian Empire that grows from this foundation eventually drives the Seleucids out of Iran entirely and expands westward to the Euphrates, creating a state that will challenge Rome as the dominant power of the Middle East for nearly 3 centuries. The Parthians fight Rome to a standstill repeatedly, most famously at the Battle of Carrhae in 53 BC, where the general Crassus, the wealthiest man in Rome, marches 35,000 soldiers into Mesopotamia and loses most of them to Parthian horse archers who feign retreat and shoot over their shoulders in the famous Parthian shot. Crassus himself is captured and, according to legend, executed by having molten gold poured down his throat, a theatrical comment on his famous greed. But the Parthians are ultimately a decentralized confederacy of noble families rather than a tightly administered empire. And in 224 AD, a Persian noble from Fars named Nadir Shah defeats the last Parthian king and founds the Sassanid dynasty. The Second Great Iranian Empire, explicitly modelled on the memory of the Achaemenids and committed to reviving Persian imperial culture. The Sassanid Empire that follows is a genuine superpower, equal to Rome and later to Byzantium in military capacity and cultural sophistication. Its capital, Ctesiphon on the Tigris, near modern Baghdad, is one of the largest cities in the world. The great Sassanid arch at Ctesiphon, the Tak Khazra, a single unreinforced brick vault 37 meters high, is still the largest such vault ever built, and substantial portions of it still stand. Zoroastrianism is restored as the official state religion. A priestly class, the Magi, gains enormous political influence. The Sassanid court produces extraordinary art, silver platters, silk textiles, and rock-cut reliefs that will influence Islamic and Byzantine visual culture for centuries after the dynasty's fall. The great Sassanid king Khosrow I, who rules from 531 to 579 AD, presides over a remarkable cultural renaissance, translating Greek and Indian scientific and philosophical texts into Pahlavi, the Middle Persian language, hosting scholars driven out of Athens when Justinian closes the Platonic Academy in 529 AD and building a new capital with rational urban planning. His grandson Khosrow II, ruling from 590 to 628 AD, launches the most ambitious Persian military campaign since the Achaemenids, capturing Syria, Egypt, Palestine, and pushing to the walls of Constantinople itself. For a few years, the Sassanid Empire holds territory nearly as vast as the Achaemenids at their peak. Then the Byzantine Emperor Heraclius counterattacks with devastating effectiveness, driving deep into the Persian heartland. Khosrow II is assassinated by his own son in 628 AD. In the 12 years that follow, the Sassanid throne passes through at least 8 rulers. The empire is exhausted, its treasury empty, its nobility factional and ungovernable. Into this vacuum comes Islam. In 636 AD, at the Battle of Qadisiyah near the Euphrates, a relatively small Arab Muslim force under Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas defeats the Sassanid army, its war elephants, and its legendary general Rustam, who falls in the battle. By 651 AD, the last Sassanid king Yazdegerd III is fleeing eastward through his own empire, finding no province willing to defend him, and is murdered in Merv by a local miller for the gold he carries. The greatest Iranian empire since the Achaemenids has ended in a generation. What follows is not a simple story of conquest and replacement. The Arabs bring Islam, but they absorb Persian civilization. Within a century, Persian administrators, scholars, poets, and courtiers are the backbone of the Abbasid Caliphate, which moves its capital to Baghdad in 762 AD, essentially building a new Persian Empire with an Arabic religious overlay. The Persian language survives, transforms, and eventually re-emerges in the 9th and 10th centuries as New Persian, written in Arabic script, enriched with Arabic vocabulary, but fundamentally the same linguistic tradition that stretches back to Darius. The great Persian literary renaissance produces Ferdowsi, whose Shahnameh, the Book of Kings, completed around 1010 AD, retells the entire mythological and historical tradition of pre-Islamic Iran in 60,000 couplets of new Persian verse. Ferdowsi spends 30 years on it. He delivers it to the Ghaznavid Sultan Mahmud, who famously underpays him. The slight is remembered to this day. The Mongol invasion of the 13th century is the catastrophe that reshapes Iran most brutally. In 1220 AD, Genghis Khan's armies sweep across the northeastern plateau. Cities that have been continuously inhabited for thousands of years are destroyed. Nishapur, Merv, and Herat, among the greatest cities of the Islamic world, centers of learning, trade, and architecture, are sacked and their populations largely annihilated. Contemporary accounts describe pyramids of skulls outside city walls. Historical geographers record that irrigation systems destroyed in the Mongol invasions were not fully rebuilt for centuries. The population of Iran may have fallen by half. The grandson of Genghis Khan, Hulagu, destroys Baghdad in 1258 and ends the Abbasid Caliphate, the political framework that has governed the Islamic world for 5 centuries. Yet Iran survives, and as it has done after every previous catastrophe, absorbs its conquerors. The Mongol Khanate rulers of Iran convert to Islam within a generation, adopt Persian as their court language, and commission extraordinary works of Persian manuscript painting that blend Chinese and Iranian artistic traditions into something entirely new. Timur, Tamerlane, sweeps through Iran in the 1380s and 1390s, again leaving piles of skulls outside city walls, again destroying populations. And again, Iran reassembles itself. Timur's descendants, the Timurids, create one of the most refined literary and artistic cultures of the medieval world in their eastern Iranian capital of Herat. Then, in 1501, a 16-year-old boy named Ismail marches into Tabriz at the head of his Qizilbash warriors and proclaims himself Shah of Iran, the first ruler to claim that title in centuries, and declares Twelver Shia Islam the official state religion of the new Safavid Empire. It is one of the most consequential religious decisions in the history of the Middle East. Iran was, at that point, predominantly Sunni. Ismail forces conversion through a combination of persuasion and coercion, reshaping the religious identity of the entire country within a generation. The Shia-Sunni boundary between Safavid Iran and Ottoman Turkey that is drawn in the 16th century through decades of devastating warfare, most notably at the Battle of Chaldiran in 1514, where Ottoman artillery crushes the Safavid cavalry, is essentially the boundary that still exists today between Iran and its Sunni neighbors. The greatest Safavid ruler, Shah Abbas I, who reigns from 1587 to 1629, transforms Isfahan into one of the most beautiful cities on earth. The Naqsh-e-Jahan Square, the Royal Square, he constructs in Isfahan, is the second largest public square in the world, surrounded by the Sheikh Lotfollah Mosque. The Ali Kapu Palace and the Shah Mosque, whose tiled domes and minarets in shades of turquoise and cobalt blue are among the supreme achievements of Islamic architecture. Abbas builds caravanserais across his empire, reorganizes the army, opens Iran to trade with European merchants, and moves his capital to Isfahan, transforming a regional city into the heart of an empire that his contemporaries regard as one of the 3 great Islamic powers alongside the Ottomans and the Mughals. The Safavids weaken and fall in the early 18th century, sacked by Afghan invaders in 1722 and replaced by a succession of short-lived dynasties. Then comes Nadir Shah, a Turkoman warlord from northeastern Iran, who reunifies the country by 1736 and launches the most spectacular military campaign in 18th century Asia, invading Mughal India, sacking Delhi in 1739, and returning to Iran with plunder that includes the Peacock Throne and the Koh-i-Noor diamond. He is assassinated by his own officers in 1747. The Qajar dynasty that eventually establishes order, ruling from 1796 to 1925, governs Iran through 2 centuries of accelerating European pressure. The great game between Britain and Russia fought largely across Iran's body as both empires compete for influence, concessions, and strategic position. The Constitutional Revolution of 1905 to 1911 is Iran's extraordinary attempt to build a modern constitutional state from within its own tradition. A parliamentary movement driven by merchants, clergy, and intellectuals who succeed in forcing a constitution and an elected majlis from the Nadir Shah in 1906. It is one of the earliest constitutional revolutions in Asia. It is also strangled by Russian military intervention in the north and British acquiescence in the south, as neither great power wants a genuinely independent Iran disrupting their arrangements. In 1908, oil is discovered at Masjid Suleiman in southwestern Iran, the first commercial oil strike in the Middle East. The Anglo-Persian Oil Company, majority owned by the British government, begins extracting it. Britain gets the oil. Iran gets a small royalty that both parties understand as deliberately inadequate. In 1921, an army colonel named Reza Khan seizes power in a coup backed initially by British officers who want stability in the region. His modernization program is rapid and sometimes brutal. He builds roads, railways, and universities, abolishes the veil by force, changes the country's official international name from Persia to Iran in 1935, and creates a centralized nation-state from a collection of tribal territories. He also accumulates personal power with no tolerance for opposition. In August of 1941, Britain and the Soviet Union, now allied against Nazi Germany and alarmed by Reza Shah's pro-German sympathies, jointly invade and occupy Iran, depose him and install his 21-year-old son, Mohammad Reza, as Shah. Reza Shah dies in exile in South Africa in 1944, having ruled for 16 years and transformed his country in ways that will outlast him. Mohammad Reza Shah, in 1950, is a young, uncertain ruler of a country that sits on the world's second-largest oil reserves, is occupied by Allied troops still withdrawing after the war, and is beginning to ask a question whose answer will define the rest of the century. Who does Iran's oil actually belong to? The Prime Minister, Mohammad Mossadegh, is building a parliamentary movement toward nationalization. The young Shah is caught between the demands of his own people and the pressure of Britain and America, who will not willingly surrender control of the oil they have been extracting for 4 decades. The answer to that question is 3 years away, and what happens in 1953 will reverberate for the rest of the 20th century and beyond. From the farming villages of the Zagros Mountains 7,000 years ago, through Cyrus and Darius, through Alexander and the Parthians, through the Sassanids and the Arab conquest, through the Mongols and the Safavids, through Nadir Shah and the Constitutional Revolution, Iran has been destroyed, rebuilt, and transformed more times than almost any civilization on Earth. And each time, something essential persists. The Persian language, the poetry, the architecture, the particular combination of pride and melancholy that shapes Iranian identity. Civilization does not require continuity of government. It requires continuity of memory. And on that measure, Iran has never truly fallen. If this journey through Iranian history moved you the way it moves me, there's one thing I ask: hit that subscribe button and keep this story alive. I'm Edward, and I want to know, what historical event should I resurrect next? Let me know in the comments.